Has anybody here ever been to a Pentecostal worship service? Oh, a few of you. Wonderful. I thought this past week about worship, and I remembered the first time I had gone to a Pentecostal service, and I was terrified, okay? I think I was about 22 years old. I'd moved to a new city, and I made one friend. And this friend was on fire for Jesus. She loved Jesus. She talked about Jesus all the time. And when she invited me to church with her, I thought, I'm a church girl. I like church. I was raised Roman Catholic. I'd gone to the Lutheran church for a while, and church was good. Well, her church was a little different. It didn't look like a church on the outside. It just looked like a small building, cement block building. And when we got inside, there's just a horseshoe of folding metal chairs. And she said there was a prophet that was coming that day, so it was a special service. And I sat down in a chair with everybody else, and they were all just kind of talking, and there's a little bit of music playing, and then the prophet walked in the door. And all the people around me bowed their heads and started to pray in tongues, and they raised their hands toward this man as he entered. Now, I didn't know at the time that that was a sign of respect of the Holy Spirit who was on this man as he walked in, was bringing the word of God, right? So they held their hands up and they prayed in tongues, which all of this is terrifying to me at the time. And then as the man walked by, they all did this with their hands. So they were following him with their hands. And I just wanted to run out of there, folks. It was not church to me, right? I wanted to leave, but I couldn't leave because I didn't know geographically where I even was, and I didn't have a car, and I didn't want to be rude to my friend, so I stayed. And I had a lot of questions. What is worship? What is it? Is that worship for them? Is it not worship for me? So this past week, as I remembered that experience, I decided to look online and find some other different kinds of worship, things that maybe you don't normally see in a church. And oh boy, the internet's great for this. I found so much. One clip that I watched showed the pastor zip-lining down to the front of the church. And you would think that there would be some landing place for him, but no, he just dangled up there. He had a suit on, you couldn't see the harness. Is that worship? I'm not sure. And then there was another pastor who had an object lesson planned. He wore an Indiana Jones hat, and he had a big whip, a real whip. And the sermon was about how we're supposed to respond when trouble comes knocking at our door. You're supposed to take your faith and whip it. And he was whipping this whip around, and I was feeling uncomfortable watching it online from the safety of my screen. Is that worship? I don't know. I can remember a church near me where the pastor rode a motorcycle down the main aisle of the sanctuary. I heard about it. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from many people. And then I heard about this church in Jackson, Michigan, where everybody wore their ugly Christmas sweaters to church. So is that worship, right? We have to be fair here, correct? No, probably not worship, but all of those events are designed to do something, and that is to make us feel something. Either feel a little bit lighter, feel a little joy, maybe feel a little awe, maybe a little uncertain, maybe to bring a point home, but they're all part of different kinds of worship. They're all made to make you feel something, and that made me wonder, is worship a feeling? Is that what it's about? If you look it up in the dictionary, it does say that worship is a feeling of reverence and awe and devotion to God. So is it a feeling? Now, back in the frontier times, which I know none of us are old enough to remember, as the settlers went west, the evangelists followed them. And they would set up these big revival tents. Maybe you've heard about this in the past. In the 1800s, early 1900s, there were these revival tents. And the evangelist would have some really upbeat music to get everybody kind of feeling good and excited. And then he would deliver an amazing message, generally about hell and how not to go there. And then the third part of the service was this call to action. So the idea, let's be clear, was not worship. The idea was conversion. This is what the evangelist wanted to do, right? That model, though, was very effective. Upbeat music, a good inspiring message, and then a call to action. In the 80s, we saw that return in something we call the seeker-sensitive movement. Churches or church leadership noticed that younger people were not coming back to church. They said it was boring. They didn't care for the ritual anymore. It wasn't, I think they said they weren't getting anything out of it. They stopped attending. So some churches like Willow Creek in Chicago put together a seeker service. And it was made to be a church service that didn't look or feel like church at all. So when you walk into one of these services, there's no stained glass, there are no candles, there's no communion table, there's no cross, there's no pews. It's generally dark with a stage, there's some lighting, there's a great worship band, you're going to have some upbeat music, you can sneak in the back and not talk to anybody if you don't want to, and you're going to be kind of entertained. They start with a really upbeat song. One church service that I attended a while ago, it's probably been 10 years or more, the song was Geronimo. I don't know if anybody remembers that song, but part of the chorus says, bombs away, and all of these people in this auditorium are singing that song with the band. But it got everybody all happy and excited, and then after that, there's another song that's maybe a little more directed, has a little more scripture in it, usually the Psalms repeated again and again, simple music that will kind of stick, that anybody can sing. And then after that, there's another song that now moves you into a more reverent place, a quieter place. Now, none of this is bad. I'm just describing how this model works. Once you get to that third song, or maybe fourth song, you're beginning to feel something. Now, if you've been working a 9 to 5 all week long and you're exhausted and your kids are driving you crazy and whatever's happening in your life, and you come in and you begin to feel good, and it's wonderful, it's a little bit addicting, and right when you begin to feel some kind of emotion, the worship leader will say something like, I sense the presence of God in this place. The Spirit of God is here, and it is coming down on every single one of us. And with the suggestion, and with the feeling, and with the music, I mean, how many of us have cried at commercials, right? Music and words together, that's a powerful mix. And it brings people into this place of reverent adoration, and they say, oh, this is God, and I feel it, and I need it so bad, and I'm so glad I'm here, and I can't wait to come back. Now, that's all great. There are two things, though, that are happening in your brain that I want you to know about. One that's wonderful, and the other maybe not so. The wonderful thing that happens in your brain during all of that music and that message that is coming through is that you are shifting from the left side of your brain to the right side. The left side is that logical side. It carries anxiety. You're projecting into the future. What am I going to do for lunch? Where did I park my car? How am I going to pay my bills? You have all of that going on the left side. But when you are just immersed in this musical experience, you are moved over to the right side of your brain, which is where your imagination lives, where you feel connection and unity, and that's where you just love everybody and you can feel the presence of God. And that is a beautiful thing. And I am all for that, because culturally, we are way too often in the left side of our brain. Way too worried about how things are going to work out, figuring out how to make things better, instead of just looking at what's around us and enjoying the beauty and the abundance of this world. We're spending way too much time on the left. So that's a really great thing that happens. And there's something else that's happening in your brain, and this is what is concerning to me. And that is that you are having a chemical release of dopamine. It's a feel-good chemical, and you are, as soon as you make that shift to the right brain, the dopamine releases, and it's almost addicting. And you feel like you're falling in love. Do you remember that, y'all? When you fell in love, it feels great. You want to do it all the time, but you can't do that every day unless you're Hosier, the singer who sings about falling in love every day. Most of us can't do that. We can't maintain that kind of a high. The dopamine is addicting. And if you feel that in church every Sunday, you will come back to feel that feeling because it feels so good. So is worship a feeling? Is that worship when we feel that way? Now, as I pondered that question, I remembered Job. And I went back and I read that first chapter of Job again. Now, if you remember the story, Job is an upstanding, righteous man. People love him. He takes good care of his family. He makes the appropriate sacrifices to God. He pleases everybody. And he's a really good person. And God, in a agreement with Hasatan, the adversary, says, you can take everything away from Job and he will still worship me. And Hasatan says, I don't think so. So they have this wager, and Job, in our reading today, has just found out that he has lost everything. Hasatan has taken everything from him. His flocks and his herds and his slaves are all gone. His children are all dead. And he is just in such grief. He's just destroyed inside. Have you ever had a day, maybe you can remember, when you got the worst news you've ever gotten? And you're in shock. You can't even think straight. You can't comprehend what's happened. That's where Job is at the beginning of our 2 verses that Betty read for us today. And I always thought that verse said, Job hears this news, tears his robe, and falls to the ground in worship. And I was always amazed, how in the world does he worship in the midst of all that? But then when I read it again, I realized I missed something. Job hears the news. He tears his robes as a sign of grief, just devastation, right? But he doesn't fall down immediately to worship. He goes someplace and finds a razor, and he shaves his head. And I had always missed that verse. I didn't quite understand it. But it was a sign of submission and humility. He's saying, all this that has happened, it is out of my control. There's nothing I can do. And so he gets a razor and he hacks off his hair. And he does not, I imagine, look like Mr. Clean. He probably did not do that good of a job. He's probably got tufts and bald spots and bloody spots all over his head. But once he's done that, then he falls to the ground, face down in the dirt, and says, blessed be the name of the Lord. I mean, that is amazing. That cannot have felt good. There's no dopamine in this man's brain, right? He is devastated. He's in pain. But he acts. He shaves his head. He face plants in the dirt, and he praises God. Those are actions. So is worship an action? The quote on the front of the bulletin says that it is. It says that we worship no matter how we feel. But if you look up the definition, it does say it's a feeling, and it also says it's an action. So what is it? Now, in traditional worship, it is more of an action. It is a series of ritual actions. And this is what we call our worship, right? So we have the reading of the word. We have the words that we speak, right? We have prayer. We have song. We have a message. And then we have a blessing. And every single week we have the same things. And those rituals do something for us. Now, some of us puts us to sleep. And we say, oh, I'm not getting anything out of this. But if you know how rituals work, you know that you can have a perfectly horrible week. You can feel terrible. You can feel such anxiety and pain in your body, and all kinds of trouble can come in with you on Sunday morning. But the rituals help to regulate your emotion. The rituals help you to calm yourself by taking your focus off all of the problems that you had this week and putting the focus on God. So in one of these models for worship, we have the creation of emotion as a way to get you to feel connected to God. And in the other model, the traditional model, we have these rituals that calm your emotion. Do you see how different these two are? So I began to wonder, which is it? Is worship a feeling, or is it an action? Is it something that we do by ourselves, like Job, individually, or is worship something we all do together? Is worship supposed to be more of a performance, a performative experience, or is it more of the liturgy, the work of the people, something you participate in with the call to worship, the call and response, the words that we say and pray and sing together. Which is it? And this is exactly what the woman at the well is asking Jesus. Now, this is such an interesting little story. I'm pulling it forward. It actually falls in Lent this year, but I wanted to use it today. This woman is an outcast among outcasts. The Jewish people don't like the Samaritans. The Samaritans don't like this woman, and she is one of them. We know that because she's drawing water at noon. It's hot. Women don't draw water at that time of day. They do it early in the morning. They get all the water they need for the day. This woman comes when no other women will be at that well, and that's on purpose because nobody likes her. She's been married how many times? She's living with a man now, not married, so she's an outcast among her people. She has a chance to talk to a prophet, Jesus. She says, I can tell you're a prophet. And what does she ask him about? She's probably got so many problems. Her life has got to be so stressful. And instead, what she wants to know about is worship. I think that's an amazing twist to this story. She's got enough things going on in her life, but she wants to know about worship. And she says to Jesus, we Samaritans, we worship on this mountain like this. You Jewish people, you worship in Jerusalem at the temple like that. Which is right? Which is it? And Jesus, of course, says, no. You're asking the wrong question. None of that is going to matter if you worship in spirit and truth. And he said, the time is coming and now has already come when we are worshiping in spirit and in truth. So it's a better question to say, what are we doing in worship, not how are we doing worship? What do we mean when we talk about worship? Really, what's the goal? The goal is to connect with God. Now, you can argue that both of the methods that we talked about today will connect you with God. The contemporary seeker service, where you feel that connection and you move to the right side of your brain, and the ritual-heavy service that helps you to feel better and takes your focus off your problems and puts it on God. That's the how, but the goal of both of those is to be connected to God. However, if you are connected to God every single Sunday, if you walk into a church and you feel good, and it's all wonderful, and you love being there, and then you go home and nothing in your life has changed because of that connection with God, then you are not worshiping in truth. Something has to change. Just like the batteries in the flashlight, right? If the batteries are full of power and energy and you connect, something changes. So you can go to church every single Sunday and go through the motions and get nothing out of it and do the same old thing, and nothing in your life will change. Or you can go to church and feel all excited and joyful and listen to the music and move into the right side of your brain and get that dopamine hit and go home and not do anything differently. That is not worshiping in spirit and in truth. That is going through the motions, whether you feel good or you feel nothing. So what I want to leave you with today, a couple of questions. One is, how do you feel the connection with God? When do you feel that? So that gives you maybe enough to think about right there, but then if you want to worship in spirit and in truth, something in you changes because of that connection. And what is that? How do you live differently today, tomorrow, the next day, because you have connected with God? Because if you go home and do nothing, that is not worshiping in spirit or in truth. So take a moment now. Let's think about that. When do we connect with God? How do we connect with God? And how do we live differently today because we have connected to the divine?